in which our lovers begin to learn the consequences of their actions. Chapter 21. "I was coming to get you. Your laundry took a long time today," said Petritsky. "Well, are you done?" "Done," replied Vronsky, smiling with his eyes alone and twirling the tips of his mustache carefully, as if, after the order he had brought to his affairs, any too bold and quick movement might destroy it. "Afterwards, it's always as if you just got out of the bath," said Petritsky. "I'm coming from Grishka," as they called the regimental commander. "You're expected." Vronsky gazed at his comrade without replying, thinking of something else. "Ah, is that music at his place?" he said, catching the familiar sounds of tubas playing polkas and waltzes. "What's the celebration?" "Serpukhowskoy's arrived." "Ah," said Vronsky. "And I didn't know?" The smile in his eyes shone still brighter. Having once decided to himself that he was happy in his love and was sacrificing his ambition to it, or at least having taken this role upon himself, Vronsky could no longer feel either envy for Serpukhowskoy or vexation with him for not visiting him first on coming to the regiment. Serpukhowskoy was a good friend, and he was pleased that he had come. "Ha, I'm very glad." Regimental Commander Diumin occupied a large landowner's house. The whole party was on the spacious lower balcony. In the yard, the first thing that struck Vronsky's eyes was the singers in uniform blouses standing by a barrel of vodka, and the robust, jovial figure of the regimental commander surrounded by officers, coming out on the top step of the balcony, loudly out-shouting the band, which was playing an Offenbach quadrille. He was giving orders and waving to some soldiers standing to one side. A bunch of soldiers, a sergeant major, and several non-commissioned officers, approached the balcony together with Vronsky. Going back to the table, the regimental commander again came to the porch with a glass in his hand and proposed a toast. "To the health of our former comrade and brave general, Prince Serpukhowskoy. Hurrah!" After the regimental commander, Serpukhowskoy also came out, smiling, a glass in his hand. "You keep getting younger, Bondarenko," he addressed the dashing, red-cheeked sergeant major, now serving his second term, who was standing right in front of him. Vronsky had not seen Serpukhowskoy for 3 years. He looked more manly, having let his side whiskers grow, but he was still as trim, striking, not so much by his good looks as by the delicacy and nobility of his face and build. One change that Vronsky noticed in him was the quiet, steady glow that settles on the faces of those who are successful and are certain that their success is recognized by everyone. Vronsky knew that glow and noticed it at once in Serpukhowskoy. Going down the stairs, Serpukhowskoy saw Vronsky. A smile of joy lit up his face. He tossed his head and raised his glass, greeting Vronsky and showing by this gesture that he could not help going first to the sergeant major, who, drawing himself up, had already puckered his lips for a kiss. "Well, here he is," cried the regimental commander, "and Yashvin told me you were in one of your dark moods." Serpukhowskoy kissed the dashing sergeant major on his moist and fresh lips, and, wiping his mouth with a handkerchief, went up to Vronsky. "Well, I'm so glad," he said, pressing his hand and leading him aside. "Take care of him," the regimental commander cried to Yashvin, pointing at Vronsky, and went down to the soldiers. "Why weren't you at the races yesterday? I thought I'd see you there," said Vronsky, looking Serpukhowskoy over. "I came, but late. Sorry," he added, and turned to his adjutant. "Please tell them this is to be handed out from me, however much comes to per man." And he hastily took 300-ruble notes from his wallet and blushed. "Vronsky, want anything to eat or drink?" asked Yashvin. "Hey, bring the count something to eat, and here's a drink for you." The carousing at the regimental commander's tent went on for a long time. They drank a lot. They swung and tossed Serpukhowskoy. Then the regimental commander himself danced with Petritsky. Grown somewhat slack now, he sat down on a bench in the yard and began proving to Yashvin Russia's advantage over Prussia, especially in cavalry attack, and the carousing subsided for a moment. Serpukhowskoy went inside to the dressing room to wash his hands and found Vronsky there. Vronsky was dousing himself with water. Taking off his jacket, he put his hairy red neck under the stream from the tap and rubbed it and his head with his hands. When he had finished washing, Vronsky sat down with Serpukhowskoy. The two men sat on a little sofa, and a conversation began between them that was very interesting for them both. "I knew everything about you through my wife," said Serpukhowskoy. "I'm glad you saw her often." "She's friends with Varya, and they're the only women in Petersburg I enjoy seeing," Vronsky replied with a smile. He smiled because he foresaw the subject the conversation would turn to, and it was pleasing to him. "The only ones," Serpukhowskoy repeated, smiling. "Yes, and I knew about you, but not only through your wife," said Vronsky, forbidding the allusion with a stern look. "I was very glad of your success, but not surprised in the least. I expected still more." Serpukhowskoy smiled. He was obviously pleased by this opinion of him, and found it unnecessary to conceal it. "I, on the contrary, will sincerely admit that I expected less, but I'm glad. Very glad. I'm ambitious. That's my weakness, and I admit it." "You might not admit it if you weren't successful," said Vronsky. "I don't think so," said Serpukhowskoy, smiling again. "I won't say life wouldn't be worth living without it, but it would be boring. Of course, I may be wrong, but it seems to me that I have some ability for the sphere of action I've chosen, and that power, whatever it might be, if I should get it, would be better in my hands than in the hands of many men I know," he said, with a glowing awareness of success. "And therefore the closer I come to it, the more pleased I am." "That may be so for you, but not for everyone." "I thought the same thing, but now I live and find that it's not worth living just for that," said Vronsky. There it is, Serpukhowskoy said, laughing. "I began by saying that I'd heard about you, about your refusal. Naturally, I approved of you, but there's a right and wrong way for everything, and I think that the action was good, but you didn't do it as you should have. What's done is done, and you know I never renounce what I've done. And then, too, I'm quite fine for the time being, but you won't remain satisfied with that. It's not your brother I'm talking to. He's a sweet child, just like our host. There he goes," he added, hearing a shout of hurrah. "And he has his fun, but for you that's not enough." "I'm not saying I'm satisfied." "It isn't just that. People like you are needed." "By whom?" "By whom? By society. Russia needs people, needs a party, otherwise everything goes and will go to the dogs." "Meaning what? Bertenev's party against the Russian communists?" "No," said Serpuchovskoy, wincing with vexation at being suspected of such stupidity. "Tout c'est un bloc. It always has been and always will be. There aren't any communists, but people given to intrigue always have to invent some harmful, dangerous party. It's an old trick. No, what's needed is a party of independent people like you and me." "But why?" Vronsky named several people in power. "Why aren't they independent people?" "Only because they don't have or weren't born with an independent fortune, didn't have a name, weren't born as near to the sun as we were. They can be bought either by money or by favors, and in order to hold out, they have to invent a trend. And they put forth some idea, some trend which they don't believe in themselves and which does harm. And this whole trend is only a means of having a government house and a salary of so much. Cela n'est pas plus fin que ça. When you look into their cards, maybe I'm worse or stupider than they are, though. I don't see why I should be worse. But you and I certainly have the one important advantage that we're harder to buy, and such people are needed now, more than ever." Vronsky listened attentively, but was taken up not so much with the actual content of his words as with Serpuchovskoy's attitude towards things, how he already thought of struggling with the ruling powers, and already had his sympathies and antipathies in this world, while for him there was nothing in the service but the interests of his squadron. Vronsky also realized how strong Serpuchovskoy could be in his unquestionable ability to reflect, to comprehend things, in his intelligence and gift for words, which occurred so rarely in the milieu in which he lived. And, much as it shamed him, he was envious. "All the same, I lack the one chief thing for that," he replied. "I lack the desire for power. I had it, but it went away." "Excuse me, but that's not true," Serpuchovskoy said, smiling. "No, it's true, it's true. Now," Vronsky added, to be sincere. "Yes, it's true now. That's another matter. But this now is not forever." "Maybe not," replied Vronsky. "You say maybe not," Serpuchovskoy went on, as if guessing his thoughts, "and I tell you certainly not. And that's why I wanted to see you. You acted as you had to. I understand that. But you should not persevere. I only am asking you for carte blanche. I'm not patronizing you. Though why shouldn't I patronize you? You patronized me so many times. I hope our friendship stands above that." "Yes," he said, smiling at him tenderly like a woman. "Give me carte blanche. Leave the regiment, and I'll draw you in imperceptibly." "But do understand, I don't need anything," said Vronsky, "except that everything be the same as it has been." Serpuchovskoy got up and stood facing him. "You say everything should be as it has been. I understand what that means, but listen, we're the same age. You may have known a greater number of women than I have." Serpuchovskoy's smile and gestures told Vronsky that he did not need to be afraid, that he would touch the sore spot gently and carefully. "But I am married, and, believe me, knowing the one wife you love, as someone wrote, you know all women better than if you'd known thousands of them." "We're coming," Vronsky shouted at the officer who looked into the room to summon them to the regimental commander. Now Vronsky wanted to listen to the end and learn what Serpuchovskoy was going to tell him. "And here's my opinion for you. Women are the main stumbling block in a man's activity. It's hard to love a woman and do anything. For this there exists one means of loving conveniently without hindrance. That is marriage. How can I tell you? How can I tell you what I'm thinking? Said Serpukovskoy, who liked comparisons. Wait. Yes, it's as if you're carrying a fardeau, and doing something with your hands is only possible if the fardeau is tied to your back, and that is marriage. And I felt it once I got married. I suddenly had my hands free, but dragging this fardeau around without marriage, that will make your hands so full that you won't be able to do anything. Look at Mazenkov, at Krupov. They ruined their careers on account of women. What sort of women? Said Vronsky, recalling the Frenchwoman and the actress with whom the two men mentioned had had affairs. So much the worse. The firmer a woman's position in society, the worse it is. It's the same as not only dragging the fardeau around in your arms, but tearing it away from someone else. You've never loved, Vronsky said softly, gazing before him and thinking of Anna. Maybe not. But remember what I've told you. And also, women are all more material than men. We make something enormous out of love, and there are always terre-à-terre. Right away, he said to a footman who came in. But the footman had not come to call them again, as he thought. The footman brought a note for Vronsky. A man brought it from Princess Verskoy. Vronsky unsealed the letter and flushed. I have a headache. I'm going home, he said to Serpukovskoy. Goodbye, then. Do you give me carte blanche? We'll talk later. I'll look you up in Petersburg. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.